Good morning. All right, so keep the squishy ball in your mind. This sermon, I just want you to know, is as much for me as it is for you. I've always been a pretty serious person in terms of having a strong sense of injustice and a focus on purposeful action. I've longed to follow the way of Jesus and the way Jesus lived, and to do so in community with others, which is very countercultural and feels somewhat serious to me. I have my own traumas, and I'm observant of the world around me, the reality of other people's pain, of the systems of oppression, greed, wealth, slavery, and exploitation that cause it. However, rather than being defined by a lack of joy, I am driven by intention and meaningful engagement. And I wonder if that resonates with others here. But the evil in our country and in our world, well, it sucks the joy right out of me. And I wonder if that resonates with others here too. I know that I need to be reminded to find joy in the work, and perhaps you do too, because the world is heavy and it is getting heavier. Let's listen again to what Isaiah tells us. For just as the heavens, just kidding, I'm going to start that over. For just as from the heavens the rain and snow come down and do not return there till they have watered the earth, making it fertile and fruitful, giving seed to the sower and bread for food, so will my word be that goes forth from my mouth. It will not return to me empty, but will carry out my will, achieving the end for which I sent it. I want you to notice something about this image of the rain. Rain doesn't fall reluctantly. Snow doesn't melt with a sigh, dragging itself down the mountain out of a grim sense of obligation. Water simply does what water does. It moves towards the earth, and the earth drinks, and something grows. There's no martyrdom in a rainstorm. There's no exhaustion in a snow melt. There's only motion toward life. And Isaiah doesn't stop at, the word will accomplish its purpose. The work is not enough on its own. The scripture goes on to say, and you will go out joyfully and be led out in peace, and the mountains and hills before you will break into cries of joys, and all of the trees in the countryside will clap their hands. This is not incidental imagery. Isaiah is telling an exiled, frightened, displaced people that the work of liberation, their return, their restoration, their whole terrifying, uncertain future, will be accompanied not by grim endurance, but by joy so large the land itself cannot contain it. The cypress will grow where the thorn bush was. The myrtle will replace the briars. Something beautiful will stand where something painful used to be. And it will stand as a memorial not to the suffering, but to the God who transformed pain with joy in abundance. The myrtle, Hadassah, is a fragrant evergreen with glossy dark green leaves, white flowers that look like fuzzy starburst from a Dr. Seuss book, and edible dark blue berries, and they're indigenous in Palestine and Israel. It is not what you would expect to see in the desert. Myrtle thrives in harsh environments and low valleys, bringing joy and fruitfulness within environments of pain and sorrow. Isaiah is not naive about the hardship. Isaiah is naming a choice. Adrienne Murray Brown names that same choice in different language. And I want to name, if any of you have read her book or plan to, about pleasure activism, a lot of it's about sex. This sermon is not about sex. Not today. If you're really excited, I'm sorry. Adrienne Murray Brown names that same choice in a different language. They write about pleasure activism, the work we do to reclaim our whole, happy, satisfiable selves from the impacts, delusions, and limitations of oppression and supremacy. They're not talking about pleasure as an escape from justice work. They're talking about pleasure as fuel for it. Adrian believes that by tapping into the goodness already inside us, we generate justice and liberation, that we grow abundance in places we've been trained to only see scarcity. Ultimately, pleasure activism is us learning to make justice and liberation the most pleasurable experiences we can have on this planet. I'll say that again, because it will preach against every instinct a lot of us have. We have been formed, some of us by seminary, some of us by movement culture, some of us by our family systems, to believe that the more something matters, the more it should hurt. Pleasure activism is us learning to make justice and liberation the most pleasurable thing we can do on this planet. We've been taught that solemnity is the price of admission to serious work. I don't believe that anymore, and Isaiah doesn't either. Mountains break into cries of joy on the way to liberation, not after it is safely over. Yes, there is a place for seriousness. And also, the work of justice making and liberation requires joy all along the way. We don't get to choose whether the work in front of us is hard. We don't get to choose whether it's risky, whether it's frightening, whether it makes us angry and grief-stricken before we even get out of bed. But we do get to choose how we approach it. We can choose to bring our creativity, our imagination, our joy, especially now in this season when so much is being asked of us. And here's what I've noticed over and over when we make that choice, when we choose joy. 1, the work actually gets done. Squishy balls. 2, the work gets done faster. 3, we waste a lot less time. Less time stuck in dread, less time paralyzed by fear, less time spinning in the kind of seriousness that looks like commitment, but is actually just exhaustion and uncertainty wearing a fancy coat. And 4, most importantly, relationships build joy, and joy in relationships builds courage. You cannot sustain the kind of courage this moment requires all by yourself, gritting your teeth in isolation. You can only sustain it in community, and community is built brick by brick out of shared joy just as much as shared struggle. Let me tell you what I mean. We had 3 weeks to plan the Clergy Protect Our Vote in Democracy press conference at the Colorado State Capitol that happened last Tuesday. And I spent the week right before the press conference out of state on a long ago planned family vacation, trusting my co-organizers to continue the work so that I could come back and continue running with them for the last 48 hours. And I did not look at my email. I chose joy that week of vacation, with my family and with my friends. This is one form of finding joy in the work, taking time for restoration even when it turns out to be really, really inconvenient. Joy is also in the relationships of trust where we step up for one another, whether it is due to taking care of our children or parents, illness, time away, or the unexpectedness of life. And we have grace with each other when one of us can't show up. On July 7th, 50 clergy showed up to the Capitol steps. We held the second largest press conference in the country that day as part of a coordinated national day of action in 15 media markets in 9 states. 2 media outlets came to our Denver press conference, and if you have ever organized a public action at the Colorado State Capitol, you will know that 2 media outlets is pretty damn good, which is kind of rough, but it's good. What mattered most was not the numbers. What mattered was the loving joy with which everyone showed up. The amazing speakers, one of which was invited the day before and showed up. The clergy standing shoulder to shoulder. The staff and volunteers of our campaign partner, Together Colorado, who agreed to partner on the press conference just 2 weeks ahead of time, and in a season where their staff were cycling through national trainings and their own vacations. The reporters whose hearts were in it. One reporter told me after the press conference, "I am so glad to be here. But I am so sad that it has come to this, that things are so bad that you have to do this." The volunteer marshals and medics from the Colorado's People Center and Bread and Roses Legal Center, people who came from these partner organizations who are not religious themselves, some of whom have been genuinely hurt by the church in their lives, but who showed up for us anyway. Because they want to see spiritual and faith leaders stepping up right now. They want us, the church, to speak out and take action as moral authority against injustice, harm, and violence. We know that we are heading into a difficult season, and we are preparing for poll chaplaincy, voting escorts, vigils held while ballots are counted, and public pressure from spiritual and faith leaders to confirm and seat all elected officials. All of it in the service of everyone's right to vote and to have the people they elect actually seated in office. And we know the threats are not abstract. This regime is still trying to use threats and coercion to end mail-in voting nationally after courts rejected this violation of the U.S. Constitution and federal law. In Colorado, 92% of us voted by mail in the 2024 election. And as a blue state, we are a target. The regime is trying to pass the federal Safeguard American Voter Eligibility, or SAVE Act, which would increase requirements for voters to prove citizenship, which is designed to stop women, Black and brown people, lower income people, and people in rural communities from exercising their constitutional right to vote. The regime has threatened to send armed federal agents to polling places, an intimidation tactic that would keep targeted people from voting. The regime is demanding state voter rolls, which is a violation of the law. Some states, like Colorado, are saying no, and others have complied, putting their registered voters at risk of federal oversight and voter purges. We already know from all of their other racially charged actions, they will be targeting non-white sounding names. Last fall, Representative Adelita Grijalva of Arizona was not sworn in or seated in the House of Representatives for 7 weeks after her election because House Speaker Mike Johnson refused to administer the oath of office. The 7-week delay set a record for the longest time a member-elect had been kept from being sworn in. The House Speaker was trying to dodge a vote on releasing the Epstein files, knowing that Representative Grijalva would have voted in favor of releasing the files. And it took immense public pressure to get her sworn in. What do we think they will do to secure their power for longer? I think it's likely that all options are on the table and that we need to be prepared. In June, the FBI raided the Ohio Organizing Collaborative's offices and seized documents and computer files. Federal agents visited the homes of staff, volunteers, board members, and partners connected to their work. The Ohio Organizing Collaborative is a nonpartisan nonprofit whose mission is to build transformative relational power with everyday Ohioans for statewide social, racial, and economic justice. To date, the Ohio Organizing Collaborative has registered more than 600,000 people to vote, a majority of which are people of color. Ohio is expected to have highly contested races for governor and U.S. Senate this November. You don't need me to draw the line for you between those two facts. Allegations of voter registration fraud are typically investigated by states and involve people working for groups that pay for signups. The Ohio Organizing Collaborative is not one of those groups. The collaborative is part of the National Faith in Action network of local, nonpartisan, faith-based organizing. And the Ohio Organizing Collaborative is a sister organization to our partner, Together Colorado, and Isaiah in Minnesota. If anyone followed the surge in Minnesota, Isaiah is the organization that organized the clergy to be at the airport as people were being deported. They organized the action at Target and a variety of other actions. I'm one of the co-founders and organizers of the Colorado Clergy Alliance, which we started in January of 2026. And we are working in partnership with Together Colorado and a national clergy campaign called Faith in Us that is organizing to protect everyone's right to vote free from intimidation, our right to free and fair elections, and our right to have our elected officials confirmed immediately into their positions. The Faith in Us campaign is being led by faith leaders and organizers from Faith in Action Network member Isaiah in Minnesota, because they experienced the federal government and what they will do to communities during the ICE surge in Minneapolis, and they chose to take a national lead to help us all protect our vote and democracy together. This is just one story. There are unfortunately a lot of stories, and some far more severe, and there is more coming. The federal government has already shown us the lengths it will go to prevent a free and fair election. This is the landscape. It is genuinely frightening. And still, 50 clergy showed up with loving joy to kick off the Clergy Protect Our Vote campaign. That is not denial. That is not spiritual bypassing. That is a choice. We are choosing to build something that people want to be a part of rather than something people dutifully endure. And because we choose joy and not fear, the press conference got built in 3 weeks by a team that included someone who was out of state for one of those weeks and a community partner that joined 2 weeks out. And because we chose joy and not fear, strangers from different spiritual and faith traditions and from none at all found each other fast and trusted each other faster than trust usually moves. Because we choose joy and not fear, the relationships formed that week are exactly the kind of relationships we are going to need when the work gets harder. And it will get harder, because Ohio's story is not the last story like it we will endure. And the story of activists in Texas who have been sentenced to 70 and 100 years in prison is not the last story we will endure. So this is my invitation to myself and to you. The work in front of us, protecting the vote, protecting our neighbors, standing between the people who are targeted and the systems built to target them. This work is not going to get lighter, but we get to decide whether we carry it like a burden or whether we carry it like the rain carries itself towards the earth. A burden, moving, purposeful, unafraid to make something grow along the way, and bending sunlight into vibrant rainbows, joyful promises of life and liberation. Isaiah promises us that the cypress will grow in place of the thorn bush. Thorn bushes are real, briars are real, immigrant concentration camps are real. Unending war and U.S.-Israeli genocide of Palestine are real. Severe death-dealing cuts to ours and the world's social safety net, regulatory departments, and environmental protections and monitors are real. God's transformation and restoration of the earth will grow not instead of hardship, but in place of it. Over time, something beautiful will stand as memorial to what is possible when we do not let fear alone drive our work. The mountains are going to break into cries of joy before this is over. The trees are going to clap And I choose to believe that, and I choose to act like that is true, because acting like that is true is exactly what makes it true faster. So find your 50 clergy, find your community partners, find your marshals and medics who show up even when the church has hurt them. Find the joy that gets the work done. Get it done faster. Saves you from wasting your one precious life in dread. And builds the relationships that will carry your courage when your own runs low. Go out joyfully, be led out in peace, and may we all be loving and joyful participants in God's transformation. Amen.